Recently, we've dedicated a whole bunch of time on this channel to talking about some of the smaller or maybe less well-known games makers out there in the world. You could think of these as alternatives to that one big red and gold brand that everyone kind of already knows about. And the point here is offering some different experiences that might just really appeal to people who are looking for a change from the normal. But if there's one big drag about getting into a lesser well-known game, it's that big grey cloud hanging over your head telling you that you're just not going to be able to find people to play with. And I know that this is a very real concern because my comments recently, when I talk about these lesser known games, are full of you people telling me that you're worried about this very thing. So today we're going to talk about how you can be the change you want to see. How if Stargrave, Frostgrave, Infinity, Kings of War, or any of these other amazing games are things that you're excited about, you should lean into that and let that excitement grow within you. But before we get into all that though, I would like to just take a minute to ask you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and to not forget to like this video if you indeed do like it. If you really want to support the channel though, there are also some cool ways that you can do that in the links below in the description. Right then, shameless self-promotion aside, let's talk about some war games. Now it's probably really obvious once you actually say it out loud, but every successful hobby games club started with just one person. And whatever games it is that you want to get into, and regardless of their local popularity, that one person can absolutely be you if that's what you want. As humans, we tend to have this really silly habit where we default to the understanding that if something is less popular, it must be because it's less wanted or because it's less valid. But there's actually a million other reasons why it might be less popular. So imagine, if you will, if there were just, say, 100 other people who all felt that way, that X game is not popular, so what's the point in getting into it? And they used that as the basis for never getting into that game. Well, that's just going to lead to 100 people that never even knew each other existed because they all believed the same thing, that they were the only person who was interested in that thing. And if we're talking about playing a war game here, we don't even need 100 other people. We need one to make a start at least. Just one other person. And the more people we get beyond that, well, we've got ourselves a group, a gaming group of people who play games and have fun. So let's talk about what ways there might be that we can reach out and find these like minds. Well, in the first instance, I really do hold true to that belief that it just takes one other person. And so I think we should first of all look at ways that you can reach out and find just one other person. I mean, running a club is definitely a non-zero amount of effort. And so, you know, before you go getting yourself into a bunch of admin and cat herding, I think it's really important to just get playing some of your chosen game, whichever one it is that's caught your interest, and find out if it's enjoyable enough to be worth the effort of scaling. And to be honest with you, I know plenty of folks who meet one other person that they play all their war games with, and that just ends up being the person that they play almost all of their war games with forever. So that could well even be the end of our story if you want it to be. But the real point I want to make here is that meeting one other person is really not that difficult. Twitter, Facebook groups, Instagram, forums dedicated to the game itself that you're interested in playing, Craigslist if you're in America, classified ads. There are so many ways that you can just reach out and find one other person who's near to you and interested in trying a game with you. And that person could be a friend or a stranger. So step one, I think, should be to start doing some internet fishing. Be safe, be sensible, but find yourself a new best friend who you can play all your games with. So, let's just say all of that went great. All of that first step went brilliantly, and you've got your new best friend and you love playing games with them, you're having a wonderful time together, but you're both of the opinion that it'd be nice to have a few more opponents. Well, the logical next step is still probably to grow things on a small scale for now. We could still have that proverbial herd of metaphorical cats in our near future, so we want to just be thinking about taking things slowly. And the advantage that you have here now is that there's twice as many of you to source additional people. you could just find one person each and suddenly each person has 3 more opponents. So chances are you and your one friend in the world, I'm definitely projecting there, have probably been happy up until this point to just play at the kitchen table in one of your homes. And that might well be working fine. But we should also now start to consider if that's going to be okay as we start to introduce multiple strangers into the equation. That might not be a thing we want in our own homes. So there's kind of a couple of ways to approach this. First of all, we're still not talking about a huge number of people here, so it might just be that you can find a couple of friends. People that you know at least well enough that they're going to be happy to just sit and play around with your collection of vintage video games whilst you and the other person play at the gaming table and they wait their turn. But that's not going to work for everybody. It might be that you've exhausted your collective friends lists in looking to find new players and you need to reach out to actual strangers at this point. And I couldn't blame you at all if you weren't comfortable with actual strangers being in your home. So we need to think about finding a venue. Lots of bars, pubs, clubs, cafes and things like that suffer from quite low day trade, especially during weekdays. So there can be ways that you can sneak into these places and persuade them to let you have a corner to play in, even sometimes at the weekend when it comes to bars and pubs during the day, and they'll be pretty happy for you to just be putting money behind the till on food and drinks and won't even necessarily charge you. And this has the added bonus effect that as you're able to bring more people, they're generally often going to be happy to just let you continue to have more space, providing those people are putting money behind the counter. Just don't be those jerks who show up with their own food and drink to a venue that's serving food and drink and hosting them without even charging a door fee. So we've looked at how we can make the first move, and we've looked indeed at how we can take the next step. And as a knock-on to that, we've also found a way that we could potentially find a good enough venue that could serve a small gaming group pretty much for life. There is one last thing that we should cover though, and that is the what if you want to expand this thing into a whole multifaceted beast, a proper bona fide gaming club that plays multiple different war games across many tables with lots of people doing stuff at once. That sounds like a big deal. Well, churches, community centres, hotels and even some libraries usually have some kind of conference or assembly facilities. However, they also almost always charge for those facilities, so it is important to remember that because you're going to have to start charging a door fee to your members. And once you start charging a door fee to your members, that means you then need a treasurer, someone who keeps track of all that money and makes information about it publicly available to all of your members. Remember that herd of cats we were talking about? But it could be worth it. I mean, imagine how satisfying it would be to be the person who started the group that turns into the local place where everybody comes to play all of those alternative games, all of those wonderful things that they never had a place to play elsewhere. That would feel like quite the feather in your cap. But of course, none of this really means anything if you can't rally more gamers to your banner at each stage of expansion. It doesn't really matter how far you decide to take it if you can't find anyone. So whilst chloroforming your best friend and forcing them to play your favourite skirmish game might be a good way to get started, and Facebook and other social media platforms can definitely help with expansion, we want to give ourselves the best chance. So are there other things that we could choose to do? Well, this is where branding your club starts to become a thing. If you really want to expand and you're serious about that, things like brochures, business cards, flyers that advertise where you play, when you play, give contact details, stuff that you can give to your members to hand out to other members so that people have always got some information available to pass on. These things really do work. I mean, nothing tells a nerd that your group is not going to disappear on them, leaving them with no opponent just after they spend £500 on a brand new army. That's definitely not happened to me before. The nicely printed bits of paper with cool looking pictures on them. And again, this costs money. And you're right to be concerned about that, but there are things we can do about it. You might be surprised to hear that local governments are often willing to provide grants for groups like this, and not just for admin and stationery costs, but even things like equipment. Am I hearing government-sponsored GameMat.eu battle mats in our future? That would be nice. But for reals, there is every possibility that you won't even need to pony up a penny of your own hard-earned cash. So it's really worth doing some research if you think this might be relevant to your fledgling group and just having a look to see what schemes your local government has. Sponsorships from local businesses are also a thing. You'd be amazed how much money a company will give you just to put their logo on something that you've made and leave it there, whether it's relevant or not. This video is not associated with or sponsored by Coca-Cola or any of its subsidiaries. The important message here though, the real key is that when it comes to both reaching out to people and financing your growing group, it's really important to get creative. That last title was a bit doomy, wasn't it? It's a bit of a sad one. But it is a genuine question, and it is a fair point. Why bother? Why go to the effort? Surely, if it was worth having a gaming group in this local area that I live in, someone else will have done it first, right? Well, we're kind of back to that self-fulfilling prophecy again, aren't we? This sort of background, passive, automatic self-defeatist attitude that we often have quite innocently, that leads us to never achieving things that could be amazing. I want to illustrate this in a sort of loosely related way with a personal story. So, cue the violins. Let's get emotional. Around April of this year, just as I turned 36, I was thinking about stopping all of this. I was absolutely exhausted by the combination of scraping by on an artist's wage and trying to make content creation work at my own cost. I was both financially and physically exhausted by the workload and the strain of trying to keep it all going. I'd reached the point where I thought returning to professional cookery might be the right thing to do. And that's a career I've not chased for some years now. I was just tired and pissed off and, to be honest, kind of feeling like I didn't see a future for myself in art and content creation. But luckily for me, I have a really great support network, and those people encouraged me to stop and think about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And so I did. I figured out what I was doing well, what I was maybe doing not so well, and put some more concerted thought towards how I spend my time and just maybe trying to be a bit smarter in how I work. And in the end, changes happened. Definitely to my business practices, but more importantly to my attitude. I allowed myself to be open to the idea that I might not be doing everything right and that I could change and adapt and do better. Fast forward 5 months and not only am I enjoying my work more than I ever have, but I'm succeeding more than I ever have too. Things are expanding on all fronts, and I've even started to get a couple of small paychecks from YouTube. I mean, I'm still a ways off that gold play button, but I'm doing better, that's the point. And the moral of the story is that you never really have a chance of succeeding at finding happiness unless you're actively pursuing happiness. Failure is always going to be a natural part of that. There are going to be setbacks and worries about setbacks, but giving into them and never starting in the first place? Failure doesn't have to be the end of the story. Failure can be the very galvanizing factor that gives you that last surge of strength to do it again and do it the right way. And that could well be the same thing with getting a cool local gaming group going. The fears of failure might be keeping you away from it, but that same energy that drives that fear could be used to actually succeed at getting it done. And it could have been very easy to take this video up until this point as just being the naive conjectures of someone who's full of wishful thinking, and so whilst I don't normally share my personal stories on YouTube, I wanted to share that one with you to try and make you understand that it is my very experiences with brushing with failure that have led me to be more happy and more satisfied than I've ever been in the past. I guess the real point is just to remind you that amazing things can absolutely happen if just one person is willing to make a start. And that one person can absolutely be you. Anyway, look, enough preachy hippie shit from me. Go and find some opponents and crush them. I'll see you in the next one, folks. Thank you for watching.